Ready? So, hello. I'm back on the microphone, Leilani Iser Reed from the Mid-Hudson Problem Gambling Resource Center. And we have today, or in this conversation, and this is conversations around grief and gambling, myself and Dr. Force have decided to record our conversations. These are impromptu, but they're impromptu, so it's just really a conversation, and we just welcome you into our space and listening to us have a conversation around grief and gambling. So, Dr. First, you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, thanks so much for you know initiating this. It started off as a thought.
Yeah.
I mean, and we've had a number of conversations, but in many cases, it's like writing in the sand. Once the conversation is over, the content is gone. You said, "Hey, how about this?" And I said, "Let's go."
Right.
My name's Larry Force. I'm a professor of psychology at Mount St. Mary College, and I run a center on aging and disability policy with my dear friend and colleague, Jeff Kahana. And I have a small private practice, and about, I don't know, probably 6 years ago, I ended up connecting with your agency, which is the New York Council on Problem Gambling. They put out some training for practitioners. Then we become part of their network. Somebody calls the hotline, and both you, Alani, and Michelle, you do a wonderful job in coordinating that and getting people to, practitioners. And I've been so impressed by it that recently both you and Michelle came to my class to meet with my students in the Theories of Social Casework class. Talk to them about, the real deal, what it's really like.
Right.
You were so well received.
That was
what a great job.
Pleasure. Thank you.
And then from that, we continued to have conversations, and you said, "Hey, what about getting together and having an informal but informative exchange?"
Right.
And then you brought to the table the topic of grief and gambling and recovery. And I'm like, perfect.
There's so many ways to even have a conversation about grief. Grief in itself is like, there's a lot, and then gambling is a lot. And in my travels in the Mid-Hudson region and just knowing about what grief is, because I also do some type of grief support. I can't really say grief counseling because I'm not a licensed counselor or social worker, but grief support that I've done over the years, I understand how grief can manifest itself in many different ways. And then there's something that we have been doing in our region is really having a lot of conversations around escapism and how people use gambling as a way to escape life traumas. And then I was like, oh, grief, gambling. And then I've been reading up on it. There is such a thing clinically wise in terms of grief gambling. And that's like when an individual, they say that it's like mostly elderly people, people who've lived a long life, and people start to pass away in their life, and then they go towards gambling as a way to cope, as a coping mechanism, and then realize that they end up becoming addicted. Or sometimes I don't even realize they become addicted, but they become addicted and they lose a lot of money. And sometimes it's not the money, but it's the relationship that they're having with this new space.
Right. And you know what? I had students, I don't know, probably about 6 years ago, do a project, and they took a different slant to it. And they were talking about, because you and I agree, we're not here to say gambling is bad. Gambling, stay away. That's not our message. Our message is when it turns into a pathological problem.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the students did this project and they looked at the positive side of casinos, and they started to emphasize the stimulation, the lights, the sounds, the community, being around other people,
right,
and also, access to reasonably priced food. And
that's what we're talking about, casinos, right?
Right. And so there is that positive side to it. Now, where you and I sit, we're looking at when people have passed that threshold.
Mhm.
And I've been in practice, a number of years, good number of years. And the thing that I find about individuals that are coming in with, the gambling profile is that it's not impossible, but it takes time. And the reason it takes time to extinguish that behavior is because of the way it's learned.
Mm,
In the field of psychology, it's called intermittent, reinforcement.
right.
So, it's not win, 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 win. It's win, lose, and there's no pattern to it. So people hold on to the behavior. Personally, if I had to describe working with some individuals that come in through your network, the way I would describe them is though they're meteorites traveling through space at a high rate of speed, wobbly fashion. They're coming in hot, some of these individuals.
Right.
Some because of family, some because of pressure of finances, the law. They're there. And I think the best thing that we can help do is help them, find a glide, a pattern. The idea of being able to, most of the clients I deal with in and out of the problem gambling network, I introduce them to mindfulness,
Mhm.
mindfulness practice. Because what happens is the person has a thought and then they go and they're defenseless. They have a thought, a compulsion. They want to go gamble. Next thing you know, they're in the casinos and they're, going beyond their limit. And then we catch up to them, the next morning, and there's so much remorse. I wish I could capture those conversations that the person has with themselves as they're driving home after their
Mm.
loss,
Do you ever
because of the
talk
fact,
about that? Because
yeah, yeah, yeah.
that
Because
could,
there's nobody that talks. I just want to say that nobody talks to us more than we talk to ourselves.
oh,
And
you got that
typically,
right. That is so
we say
true.
things to ourselves that we would never allow anybody else to say.
Right.
So, and my takeaway is, I wish everybody could live the life they say they want to live at 7 a.m. in the morning after they've had an experience that hasn't gone well.
Right.
They're making all these commitments, never going to do it again, and then 2 o'clock in the afternoon we catch up to them,
So
repeating it.
what about that experience that either that self-talk, after they're leaving that the space that they've been gambling or even in the when you describe the meteorite, where in that space do you find like that's where the grief is?
I think the grief really comes in, after the adrenaline is gone. I mean, there's adrenaline. I heard a statement one time: if you really want to know what a place is like, look at the eyes of the people that are coming back from it, that are leaving it. And that's an interesting take, because when you do
Mm,
sometimes enter, those types of arenas, you don't see a lot of people, high-fiving and clapping their hands, or, their heads are down, they're shaking their heads, because they haven't had a good experience. And I think, when does it come in? I think, the grief, the overwhelming grief and remorse is during the night. It interferes with dream sleep,
mhm.
it interferes with sleep patterns. I think waking up in the morning, it's very similar, from the accounts that I hear from people, is very similar to having a major hangover, even though you haven't used a substance, to ingest, because there's so much remorse and there's so much. And I think that, because the other part of it is that the grief, and because as people come into recovery, they're also grieving in many ways the loss of the person that they're leaving behind, because not all of it was bad. They had a lot of laughs, they had a lot of fun,
Right.
a lot of camaraderie.
I talk about that a lot in terms of how much we have to grieve our former self. We have to allow that person to die in order for a new person to live, and that new person is a person that is emerging out of recovery and not going back to the person who was displaying addictive behaviors. And that is, I think, is one of the
Uh,
most pivotal points in terms of the mindset and that self-talk that we have to have and understand when we're going through what we're going through. It's
I mean,
allowing, giving that permission
right.
to let go.
I mean, Daryl Strawberry, I heard him speak, We invited him, and he joined us by conference call at the conference we did probably about 8 years ago. But I heard him speak. He's now in recovery. He's a minister. He ordained minister. He owns 3 rehabs in Florida, and he published a book with some of his associates called "Don't Give Up on Me."
Mm-hmm.
And he's up on the altar because he's in this church that I went to hear him speak at, and he says, "You know that guy you thought you knew?" And he's pointing to somebody over here. That that guy you thought you knew.
Mm-hmm.
He said he's dead.
Right.
Now, Strawberry talks about his connection to recovery was religion, the affiliation with Jesus Christ, and the religious community. But he pointed to him, even though the person didn't exist, the imaginary Darryl Strawberry. He said he's dead. He doesn't exist anymore. And what I tell clients all the time, you have to figure out, and I can help you. We can work on this together. New ways to entertain yourself.
New ways to, like, that's when they say people who are addicted to things, it's like you have to leave the community, the people that you were with when you were doing those behaviors. You can no longer be around them because they're going to trigger you to go back, and you have to change your ways. You have to change your community and find different ways of having a healthy and happy life. What is something else that's going to excite you? What's something else? And then also, but then how, in that process of grief and listening to yourself to say, I got to remove myself from that and find something else that's going to excite me. How does that person not get addicted to something else?
Well, look, if you have an underlying, obsessive compulsive behavior, we might catch up to that person and they have 15 different blends of tea in their cabinet, or they got 20 briefcases, or they love peanut butter now. I mean, look,
Right.
the idea is that some people are a compulsion looking for a host. They're looking for a place to put it. And I think, what do you hope for? You hope for moderation.
Right.
But I think that there can be positive. I think OCD behavior, which is underlying a lot of the gambling disorder, OCD behavior, it can be moved into a positive way. Sometimes we call it passion, where the person is so passionate about an idea. But that idea might be helping kids with special needs. That idea might be doing work in the community. That's not bad.
No.
But it's when this whole thing, because if you look at the pattern, you and I sit at the table where we're being introduced to people that, for whatever reason, have identified themselves or self-identified, or they got a problem with gambling. And it's not a happy space for them. And there is a lot of grief, and there is a lot of loss. And my take on things is, abstinence is easier than moderation. I don't know what else to tell you. I tell my clients, I'm not a sheriff. I'm not here to take anything away from you. But the fact is, I can only tell you from my own journey, family system, abstinence is easier than moderation, because with moderation, you're continually juggling it. It's continually, obsessing about it.
Mm. So I know we have like a brief time today. I just want to remind, like, just in our conversations, like, grief is sorrow. Grief is the loss of something, is what you are experiencing. It's almost, grief is the experience after losing, after losing something. And grief and losing something doesn't necessarily mean losing a actual person. It could be the death of the self. It could be the loss of your money after you gambled. There's a lot of different ways that we are grieving. We grieve all the time, and grief is almost, to me, continually and throughout your years and throughout your life. It's just how we manage it and how we get through it and how do we accept it. And also, like, if it is something that we have to do to forgive ourselves, that's also something that we have to do too. But we could talk about that in other conversations.
Yeah, and look, absolutely, and we're going to have multiple. I mean, if there wasn't a time limit today for both of us, we'd be here until Saturday. But but the fact is, you know, the old saying, you got to give time time.
You
I
gotta.
teach I'll leave you with this. I teach a psychology of death and dying class, and I teach it
Mhm.
backwards. So I start at the afterlife, then I take the students to a cemetery, then to a funeral parlor, then to hospice, a nursing home, and I ended on the medical center nursery in our community. Because I really do believe there's a beginning, a middle, and a new beginning. And one of the things that I say to the students is people live uniquely, they die uniquely, and they grieve uniquely.
Mm.
And the same type of thing with this behavior pattern. Everybody will grieve in a very unique way. But the thing is that you and I can both give testimony to from so many different perspectives of our personal and professional life. There's always hope.
Right.
There's always hope. I mean,
Always.
there's always hope.
That's
So
what we.
thank you so much for initiating this, and
Yeah, I look forward to
let's
even
go.
bringing on people in and we can have more conversations. This is going to be awesome. I
Beautiful.
love conversations. Conversations help us understand each other, and it helps us understand in context because there is no one way of doing something or believing in some. It's just so many ways that we can be, and we only can learn that through conversation. So,
I
and
love
hopefully
that. There's
people
so
learn.
many ways that we can be.
Yes.
I love that. So
Well,
again,
I
thank you
definitely
so much for the invite.
I'm definitely taking, you gotta give time. So I took one, you took one.
Sounds good. Thank you so much.
Thank you.